This is Granger with Hughes Retirement Group. I want to encourage our viewers out there to hit the subscribe button for additional content. Today I'm talking about a tool called a fixed indexed annuity. We utilize this tool a lot of times for retirees who are getting ready to retire or thinking about retirement, and they want to take a little bit of the risk off the table, but still have an opportunity to make some gains in the market. So for many of you, you may have heard of annuities, and there's different types of annuities: variable annuities, fixed indexed annuities, and fixed annuities. Now today we're talking about fixed indexed annuities. Key being index, meaning it's linked to the S&P, it's linked to the Dow Jones or the Cape-Shiller index, different indexes that will allow for potential growth. Now let's talk about some pros and cons. You hear a lot of people talk about variable annuities having high fees or losing money in variable annuities. That does not apply here to fixed index annuities. So here's the positive of a fixed index annuity. Number one is you can generate an income stream. So for a lot of our clients who are getting ready to retire, maybe they don't have a pension like their parents or their grandparents had, so they want to create that guaranteed pension or that guaranteed income that maybe their parents or grandparents had. This is a great way to do that. They can do that a lot of times with a minimal fee, usually 0.75 to 0.95 basis points. Another key here is capital preservation. So right now there's a lot of volatility in the market. We're seeing the swings, we're seeing the ups and downs of the market. So to be able to preserve your capital or protect your principal is a very, very important thing for those people who are getting ready to retire or thinking about retirement. They're free from the stock and bond market. So we see the Fed raising interest rates. We see the stock market rising, falling on a daily basis. So that volatility, you're taking that off the table. So when we go back to saying it's linked to an index, let's say it's, and I'll get into this in a minute on the con side, but let's say you're linked to the S&P, you will take part of the gains of the S&P, but none of the losses. So if you had, let's just say, $100,000, for instance, that $100,000 is protected. We call that zero is your hero. So unless you go ahead and physically take out money from that $100,000, that would be the only way that your account would decrease in this particular strategy. So zero is your hero. So if the S&P does, let's say, 10%, you would take part in a portion of that gain. Let's just say you take part in 50% of that gain, you would make 5%. Okay, so your 100,000 would go to 105,000. Now, here's why a lot of people will utilize this strategy. If the S&P were to lose 40% like it did in 2008, your 100,000 would stay steady, okay? And here's the key to that next component. You get to lock in those gains. So in a lot of cases, that 100,000, once it goes to 105,000, that becomes your new principal. So capital preservation, again, you can't go below that 105 if the markets were to take a downturn. So you're providing that peace of mind. So a lot of our clients that we deal with, typically we're dealing with people 55 and older, have already accumulated their wealth. They want to preserve it, they want to grow it in a safe environment, and this is a way to do this. So we look at this as a separate asset class. You look at the stock asset class or the bond asset class, this could be its own asset class. And another situation here is potential low cost. So there's situations where if you're not looking for income, you can get a lot of these strategies with no fees. So there's no fee to an advisor, there's no commissions that come out of your actual principal to the advisor, that you can actually allow for more growth in that situation. Now, taking a look at a few cons here, liquidity. So one of the first things that we're going to look at when we're talking to a client is, do you have enough liquid money in the event of emergency? The reason we have to do that is because there are surrender charges. So typical surrender charge, for example, we would look at, you would start usually, let's say it's a 10-year contract, you might see it decrease like this, okay? So the first year you may have a 10% penalty, second year 9, 8, 7, 6, so forth, okay, until the contract ends at 10 years. So that is something to be looking at when you're talking about, you hear a lot of people say, well, you're going to lock your money up. In a sense, you do. But the positive is in a lot of cases, these annuities here, let's say you've got 100,000, you will have access to your money. So you may have access anywhere from 7 to 10% a year, penalty free. So if you needed to go in and get 10,000 out, you could. So it's not like you're locking that entire 100,000 out. You still have liquidity, but it's important to look at the liquidity that you have elsewhere so that you're not fully relying on this, okay? And then another thing that you could be looking at that's a potential con is these caps or the spreads or participation rates. So I mentioned over here, if the S&P does 10, you get 5. that would be an example of a potential cap or spread or participation rate. So here's the way it works. A cap could potentially have, you could have a 5% cap or a 10% cap. Meaning if the S&P does 13%, you're only getting 10 or you're only getting 5 depending on the cap. Another way that they can structure these is a participation rate. So how much do you get to participate in? So let's say the S&P does 10%, but it's got a 50% participation rate. Well, that means you're going to participate in 50% of that 10%, meaning you return 5%. Okay? And then another component, they may have a spread. So let's say the spread is 1 or 1%. If the S&P does 10, they're going to take 1% back. So they may give you 9% in that scenario, okay, on a spread. So it's important to look at these facets. Nothing is the best thing since sliced bread, but nothing is the worst thing in the world either. So looking at all these tools and how they can best be utilized in your specific retirement is key. So we use this a lot of times, like I said, for people who want to take some of that risk off the table, still be able to participate in some of the gains, but not be involved directly in the stock or bond market.